My brother bullied me out of our father's estate for $1. 2 months later, he was bankrupt. I let my greedy older brother bully me into giving him our father's entire estate for a single piece of paper and a $1 bill. He actually framed that dollar. He bought a sleek, matte black frame, mounted the crisp green bill against velvet backing, and hung it right above the mahogany desk in his downtown office. For months, he bragged to anyone who would listen, clients, family friends, the bartender at his overpriced country club, about how he had finally put his little brother in his place, secured the family legacy, and proven himself as the apex predator of local real estate. He was laughing all the way to the bank, riding high on the absolute certainty that he was an instant multimillionaire. That arrogant, booming laugh of his lasted exactly 4 months. It stopped the day the IRS showed up to collect a hidden $2 million tax lien, and the city's building inspectors arrived to condemn a property that was literally bleeding money. Welcome to the real world, Richard. To understand how my brother walked willingly into a financial guillotine, you have to understand the dynamic of the Miller family. Richard was the golden child, a guy who was born on third base and spent his whole life acting like he hit a triple. He was a venture consultant, which is a polite way of saying he used complicated buzzwords to tell other people how to run businesses they built with their own bare hands. I'm an industrial logistics manager. I wear steel-toed boots to work, I look at spreadsheets, and I fix supply chains. I don't do flashy, and I don't do aggressive. For 40 years, Richard saw my quiet nature as weakness. He thought I was slow, simply because I didn't feel the need to constantly announce my own intelligence. Our father, Arthur Miller, was a lot like Richard. Dad was a larger-than-life figure in the Cleveland commercial real estate scene. His pride and joy was the Hawthorne Complex, a massive, 80,000-square-foot commercial warehouse sitting on prime industrial land near the interstate. Growing up, the Hawthorne Complex was the monument to our family name. Fully leased out to manufacturing tenants, constantly bustling with 18-wheelers, it was the engine that paid for Richard's private colleges and my modest state university tuition. To the outside world, Dad was a titan, a self-made millionaire who ruled his domain with an iron fist. But pride has a funny way of blinding a man to his own ruin. When Dad had a massive, fatal stroke in late October, the grief hit me like a physical blow. Regardless of his flaws, he was my father. I spent the first week arranging the funeral, calling relatives, and sitting in his quiet, empty house feeling the sheer weight of his absence. Richard, on the other hand, showed up to the memorial service in a custom Italian suit, already holding court near the catered buffet, talking loudly about portfolio restructuring and liquidating redundant assets. He didn't see a tragedy, he saw an acquisition. Dad's will was straightforward. The entire estate, which essentially consisted of the Hawthorne Complex and the house, was to be split equally 50-50 between his 2 sons. We were supposed to co-manage the property or sell it and split the proceeds. But Richard had absolutely no intention of sharing the throne. 2 days after the funeral, while Richard was busy schmoozing potential investors at his club, I was at Dad's house doing the heavy lifting. I was the one boxing up his clothes, throwing out expired food, and sorting through the chaotic, dust-choked disaster of his home office. Dad never trusted digital records. He kept everything in rusted metal filing cabinets. I spent 3 grueling nights sitting on the floor, sorting through decades of paperwork, trying to get a handle on the estate before we met with the probate lawyer. That's when I found the poison. Dad hadn't been a titan for a very long time. The industrial market had shifted, maintenance costs had skyrocketed, and instead of selling, Dad had doubled down, desperate to maintain the illusion of success. He had taken out massive, high-interest commercial loans against the property just to cover the operational overhead. But that wasn't the worst of it. Stuffed in the very back of the bottom drawer, hidden in manila folders marked miscellaneous, were the notices from the Internal Revenue Service and the county tax assessor. Dad had stopped paying payroll taxes for his LLC and property taxes on the warehouse 7 years ago. The documents laid it out with terrifying mathematical precision. There was a federal tax lien attached directly to the Hawthorne Complex. The state had their own liens. Furthermore, there was a suppressed structural engineering report from 2 years prior stating that the warehouse's main roof and load-bearing trusses were on the verge of catastrophic failure, requiring a minimum of $800,000 in immediate remediation. If the county inspectors ever saw that report, they would condemn the building, allowing all the tenants to legally break their leases and walk away, dropping the property's income to zero. I sat on the floor of that dusty office at 3 in the morning, running the numbers on a legal pad. The property was appraised on paper at around $4 million. But the mortgages, the tax liens, the back penalties, and the required structural repairs totaled just over $5.2 million. The Hawthorne complex wasn't a gold mine. It was a financial black hole. The estate was massively underwater. Normally, in a situation like this, the estate goes into probate. The creditors force the sale of the asset, the debts are paid off as much as possible, and the heirs simply walk away with nothing. You don't inherit debt unless you actively choose to assume it. And I knew, with absolute chilling certainty, that Richard would want to assume it. Richard didn't know about the debt because Richard never rolled up his sleeves to do the grunt work. He just looked at the appraised value of the real estate, looked at the monthly rent roll, and saw a cash cow. The trap set itself. All I had to do was let my brother be exactly who he was. We met at the office of Dad's probate attorney, a tired-looking man named Mr. Vance. Before Vance could even open the file to discuss the reality of the estate's liabilities, Richard took control of the room. He slammed his hands on the mahogany table, leaned forward, and looked at me with that signature condescending sneer. "Let's not waste time and rack up billable hours," Richard announced. "Dad's estate is the warehouse. You and I both know you don't have the stomach or the intellect to manage a commercial property of that magnitude. You're an operations guy. You play it safe. If we co-own this, you'll just drag me down. I want full control." Mr. Vance cleared his throat. "Richard, before we discuss transfers of beneficiary rights, we need to look at the financial health." "I know the financial health," Richard snapped, cutting the lawyer off completely. "It's prime real estate. I've already had 3 developers tell me what it's worth. I don't need a lawyer to tell me how to read a balance sheet." I kept my face perfectly neutral, letting my shoulders slump a little, playing the part of the intimidated younger brother perfectly. "Richard," I said softly, injecting just enough hesitation into my voice. "Dad left it to both of us. It's half mine. You can't just take it. I should get something." "I'll buy you out of your share of the business," Richard countered smoothly. "But I'm not liquidating my own assets to pay you cash right now. Here's the deal. You sign a quitclaim, renouncing your beneficiary interest in the estate and handing full title of the LLC and the property to me. You walk away clean. In return, once I refinance the property and pull the equity out, I'll cut you a check for $100,000. Consider it a favor. I'm saving you from the stress." $100,000? I feigned outrage. "The place is worth millions. That's insulting." We went back and forth for 20 minutes. The more I resisted, the more aggressive and arrogant Richard became. He threatened to tie the estate up in litigation for a decade. He threatened to use his connections to ensure I'd have to pay half the maintenance costs out of my own pocket during the probate process. He brought up every childhood insecurity, every time Dad had praised him over me, using psychological warfare to break my resolve. Finally, I let out a long, defeated sigh. I looked down at my hands. "Fine, you win. You always win. Richard, I don't want to fight you for the next 5 years. I just want peace." Richard smiled. It was a predatory, victorious smirk. "Smartest decision you've ever made. Because the transfer of property rights requires a legal consideration to be binding. We couldn't just do it for nothing." Mr. Vance, looking deeply uncomfortable but bound by his client's direct instructions, drafted the paperwork. I agreed to legally disclaim my inheritance and sign a quitclaim deed, transferring all my rights, titles, and interests in the Hawthorne complex to Richard. In exchange, Richard reached into his designer leather wallet, pulled out a crisp $1 bill, and slid it across the table to me. "Don't spend it all in one place, little brother," he chuckled. To avoid the property being liquidated in probate, Richard then signed a formal agreement to personally assume all debts, encumbrances, and liabilities attached to the LLC and the real estate in order to take immediate, unencumbered title. He waived the standard title search and discovery period, completely convinced that he was outsmarting everyone in the room and stealing a multi-million-dollar empire for a single buck. I took the dollar, signed the paper, and walked out into the crisp Ohio air, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first few months, Richard lived like a king. He leveraged his new asset, based on its surface appraisal, to take out a personal line of credit. He bought a new Porsche. He booked a first-class trip to Monaco. He posted photos on social media of himself standing in front of the Hawthorne complex with captions about building the empire and sweat equity. He even texted me a photo of the framed $1 bill hanging in his office. I didn't reply. I just waited. The implosion didn't happen slowly. It happened all at once, like a controlled demolition. It started in March. Richard went to a major commercial bank to officially refinance the warehouse and secure a massive cash-out loan. The bank, unlike Richard, actually did their due diligence. They ran a deep title search and pulled the municipal records. The loan officer took one look at the $2 million federal tax lien sitting on the property and immediately denied the application. When the IRS detects that a property with a massive lien has changed hands and the new owner has legally assumed personal responsibility for the LLC's debts, their automated collection systems trigger. They didn't just send Richard a letter. They issued a notice of intent to levy. Because Richard had signed that personal guarantee to bypass probate, the debt wasn't just tied to the failing building anymore. It was tied to him. His personal bank accounts, his venture consulting firm's assets, even his precious Porsche, were suddenly in the crosshairs of the federal government. Panic set in. Richard frantically tried to sell the building to developers, hoping to just wash his hands of it and break even. That's when the second shoe dropped. During a routine walkthrough by a prospective buyer's inspector, the catastrophic roof damage was noted and immediately reported to the county. The city inspectors arrived 3 days later. They took one look at the bowing trusses, slapped a bright red, condemned sticker on the front doors, and ordered the building evacuated. By the end of the week, every single tenant had invoked the constructive eviction clause in their lease. They stopped paying rent, packed up their inventory, and left. Richard was left holding a gigantic, empty, rotting concrete box that generated zero income, while owing the IRS $2 million and the mortgage company another $2.5 million. The phone call came on a Tuesday night. I was sitting on my back porch, nursing a cold beer, when my phone started buzzing frantically. It was Richard. I let it ring 3 times before hitting accept. "Hello." "You knew," he screamed into the receiver. His voice was completely unhinged, stripped of all its usual polished arrogance. "You knew about the liens. You knew about the roof. You set me up, you son of a bitch." I took a slow sip of my beer. "I didn't set you up, Richard." I tried to slow down. "The lawyer tried to tell you to look at the financials. You explicitly said you didn't need anyone to tell you how to read a balance sheet." "It's fraud," he yelled, his voice cracking. "I'm ruined. The IRS just froze my primary checking account. The tenants are gone. The building is worthless. I'll sue you. I'll drag you through court." "You can't sue me for giving you exactly what you demanded," I replied, my voice perfectly calm, a stark contrast to his hysteria. "You bullied me, Richard. You threatened me. You told me I wasn't smart enough to handle Dad's legacy. You insisted on taking full control. And you explicitly waived the title search because you were so eager to steal my half of the inheritance. I just stepped out of your way and let you be the genius you always claimed to be." There was a long, ragged silence on the other end of the line. For the first time in his entire life, Richard had absolutely nothing to say. There was no spin, no corporate buzzword, no manipulative tactic that could save him from the math. He was solely, legally, and financially responsible for a $5 million disaster. "You traded your peace of mind for your greed," I told him softly. "Good luck with the empire, Richard." I hung up the phone, blocked his number, and looked out over my quiet, modest backyard. Last I heard, Richard had to declare Chapter 7 personal bankruptcy. The bank foreclosed on the warehouse, the government seized his assets, and his venture consulting firm went under because nobody wants to take financial advice from a guy who bankrupted himself over a toxic asset. He moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, working a mid-level corporate job, stripped of his luxury suits and his country club membership. As for me, I kept my savings, my sanity, and my quiet life. I never saw a dime from my father's estate, but I consider it the greatest financial victory of my life. Sometimes, The most valuable thing you can do is recognize a sinking ship and have the wisdom to walk away. And I still have the satisfaction of knowing that somewhere in a cardboard box of my brother's repossessed belongings, there is a beautifully framed, crisp $1 bill. The exact price he paid to ruin his own life.